Good day, everyone, and welcome to the big debate. I am Terence Agbo, and I will be co-hosting today's roundtable discussion with Harifon, who goes by the name Trescatos. We are very pleased to be back after a period of hiatus. The coronavirus pandemic made life difficult for all of us, but during these difficult and uncertain moments, it is very important that we work together to get things right and get the right information out there. Today, we'll be presenting to you a roundtable discussion on COVID-19 vaccines and vaccine hesitancy. The COVID-19 or the coronavirus pandemic has caused significant human loss since its outbreak last December. As of today, Sunday, December 13th, over 72 million people have been infected, with approximately 1.6 million deaths worldwide. Due to the consistent and persistent increase in numbers of infections and deaths, several public health measures were implemented early on and even activated recently. Some of these include universal wearing of masks, whole city and even country shutdowns, as well as international borders being obstructed, amongst others. All these efforts were made in an attempt to limit the spread of the virus, as well as control the cost on human lives, the healthcare system, and the economy. One of the most effective tools used by public health experts to control the spread of infectious diseases is through vaccination. In the last few months, governments and pharmaceutical companies have invested significantly in research towards the development of vaccines against COVID-19. Recently, some of these pharmaceutical companies announced breakthroughs in the vaccine development projects. As at now, approximately 5 to 10 vaccines are in the approval or vaccination phases in different countries across the world, raising the hope for the return of things to normal if they are eventually effective. While vaccines may be protective, historical data has shown that some vaccines have come with unintended consequences and outcomes, resulting in the rise of many anti-vaccination campaigns and growth of anti-vaxxers worldwide. It is therefore imperative that governments, public health authorities, community leaders, as well as experts, are as honest as possible to educate the public on how safe and effective these vaccines will be, and the eventual role of vaccination in the control of this pandemic. Today at the Big Debate Cameroon Roundtable, we have 3 outstanding guests, which I will introduce them later on. These people will be answering some of the questions you have raised in the early stages of the pandemic, as well as in the vaccine development protocols. They will also discuss the history of vaccination, what vaccines do, the COVID-19 vaccines, and why vaccine hesitancy has grown significantly over the past years. In addition to that, we will be accepting questions from you, the audience, and if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comment section of this live broadcast. So welcome everyone and good afternoon once more. So with me today, I have one of our guests is Dr. Alison Wiyeh. Alison did her medical training at the prestigious University of Wiyeh in Cameroon. She also holds a Master's of Science degree in clinical epidemiology from the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. Thereafter, she worked as a senior scientist at the Cochrane, South Africa, a unit of the South African Medical Research Council. Her research interest is in epidemiologic methods, vaccine implementation, and infectious disease epidemiology. She is currently a PhD student in epidemiology at the University of Washington in the United States of America. So good afternoon, Alison, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Terence. Thank you so much for having me. It's an amazing opportunity to get to talk about this very interesting topic, and I really applaud your efforts and your team for all the great work you're doing in sending out the right science out there to our people. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. It's a
Thanks for
privilege
having me.
to have you, to educate the public on this very, very interesting but also controversial subject. Our next guest is Dr. Munoh Kenne Foma, who I believe many of you are very familiar with him. Munoh also did his medical training at the University of Yaoundé, a very prestigious one as well, but not as prestigious as the University of Wiyeh. So, okay, don't mind me. He worked in Cameroon for several years. He also holds a master's in public health and has a very, very strong interest in delivery of healthcare to the people as well as this particular subject of today. He also has training in laboratory medicine and clinical pathology. Currently, he is a chief resident in internal medicine at the Richmond University Medical Center in the United States. And since the outbreak of COVID-19, he has been in the front lines and also working on another very, very important project, the Cameroon Town Hall with medical practitioners meeting every other Saturday. So welcome, Dr. Munoh, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much, Terence. It's a pleasure always to be with you and to be part of this great team to our population and to Cameroonians about what vaccine is all about. Just a bit of a correction. I am now an internist, but in the US, and I'm doing a fellowship in hematology.
Hematology, yes.
Yeah, hematology. So.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Oh, congratulations for that big step forward. So, and thank you for joining us. We are very pleased to have you, and we very much appreciate all the efforts you have been doing out there at the front lines, but also in the education portion of it, especially organizing the Cameroon Health Practitioners Town Hall. So thank you again. So our third guest is Dr. Eugene Ateh, who I believe most of you are also very familiar with him. He has been a guest on this program earlier in the year during when the clinical trials and the vaccine trials for COVID-19 started. So Dr. Eugene is a holder of a PhD in veterinary medicine. He is currently retired, at least that is what he mentioned to us the last time. But before then, he worked at the animal model division of the Institute of Human Virology at the University of Maryland School of Public Health as a research lead. He coordinated with other researchers in developing animal models for HIV, HIV-associated malignancies, HIV vaccine development in monkeys, cancer, and other neurological pathologies. In addition to that, he has also developed a urine antibody assay for malaria diagnosis. He is a strong advocate and promoter of science. So welcome, Dr. Eugene Ateh, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr. Agbo. It's a pleasure to be on your forum once more. And I'm really pleased and happy that you always find time to discuss very pertinent issues at very strategic time. This particular topic on hesitancy and the vaccines for COVID is very timely because it happens just the day they've started rolling out these vaccines. And I know your co-host, Tres Catos, is one of the anti-science and anti-vaxxers. And he has a loud voice, so we will need to have him here so that we can give him some message to tell his audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Tres will be joining very soon. So without much ado, I think we'll be diving into the program. So the program will be divided today into 3 portions. We will try to give the audience as much information, basic information on what vaccines are and how vaccines are developed. And then we will go to the second part of the program, which is basically the COVID-19 vaccines and some of the information about those vaccines. And thirdly, and most importantly to me, and I believe to all of you, it's about the vaccine hesitancy, which is, I think, for any vaccine to be effective, as good as it is, people have to take it. So discussing vaccine hesitancy and addressing it today is of cardinal significance. And then finally, we will be taking questions from the audience. So people, all the viewers, please feel free to type your questions on the underneath the video. I have some questions already, but please do send us your questions. Maybe we would address some of your questions even before you ask them. So thank you once more for joining. And Dr. Munoh, I'll be starting this conversation with you today. Remember, it is formal. It has to be basic as possible. And then also, as formal as it is, please, if he says something that you think that if any of you guys want to add anything, feel free to interject and include and add more information as politely as you can. So thank you once more. And so, Dr. Munoh, please, could you briefly tell us what vaccines are and how they work and why vaccination is important?
Yeah, thank you, Terence. And I think that's a very important question. I would like to start by just reminding the public exactly what the great discoveries have been in the last 21st century and the 20th century. If you look at the interventions we've done in public health, WHO classified the most important interventions that have occurred in the centuries that we've had. And hygiene and sanitation was at the top of it. Vaccination was the second, and the discovery of antibiotics was the third. The fourth was the campaign against smoking. This tells you that these are the things that have actually reduced mortality. Now, what is a vaccine? To better understand vaccine, we need to understand pandemics. If we look at smallpox, it's a disease that has been eradicated. It killed over 500 million people throughout the time when we had smallpox in the world, from the creation to now. We do have poliomyelitis that used to actually cause a lot of problems to our kids, not forgetting measles. These are all viral infections that do cause us disease, and later on, our system is able to prevent itself from getting those diseases a second time. But it costs a lot of pain to have this disease before developing immunity, meaning your body is able now to fight it. So scientists came out with this idea. It came out by chance during the time of the smallpox, where people were infected with cowpox and discovered that they could not have smallpox. This was observed by a British scientist, a doctor there. He didn't know what he was observing. This later on became known as Vaccination, which was the vaccine against smallpox. So a vaccine in itself is trying to introduce to our armies, our bodies made of soldiers. It's like the US Army, made up of generals, made up of intelligent officers who walk around trying to identify people who are trying to kill it. So they realized that we could introduce into our bodies dead viruses. They could introduce what we call weakened viruses. We could introduce particles of those viruses. We could introduce proteins into the human body, and the human body is tricked to actually identify this as the virus itself and build up an immune response, which is able to activate the immune system, which are our shoulders, and create a memory which we can keep for a long time. This memory actually can last a lifetime in certain situations like the smallpox, like the measles, they do last a lifetime. And next time our body comes in contact with that virus, with that parasite, with that bacteria, our body is able to say, oh, I know you. The immune system is such an ingenious system that the body doesn't love to fight wars twice. The body loves to fight a war once. Each time your human body fights the war twice, it means that virus or that bacteria is so intelligent and it's tricking our system. So when we fight a war, we keep memories of that war, and we're able to use those memories in the future to fight it. So that is actually what a vaccine is. It's tricking the immune system with a particle, with a protein, with a messenger RNA, with an attenuated particle in order for the immune system to be able to fight and destroy a viral infection, which is still to come. And this strategy has actually reduced mortality and eradicated several diseases, with poliomyelitis being the most recent one which has been eradicated. So I hope this was a bit, I wanted it to be as simple as possible for people to relate with it while we're talking about this topic.
Yeah, I think you did a fantastic job. And if I may ask, I don't know if Dr. Eugene or Alison have anything to add. Okay, I think everyone is good. So I also don't have anything to add. So you did a very fantastic job to make it as basic as possible. So the take-home message here.
Terence, I may want to add that there are times, I know a second follow-up question will be, what are the types of maybe things, how do we create vaccines? I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I think we have that question, yes.
Yeah, so because I want to be as slow as possible, vaccines can be created. There are different forms of vaccines we do have. It could be a virus that has been made weakened, meaning it's called, usually we have a virus which usually can affect humans. We get it in the lab, we make sure that that virus is no longer able to cause disease by attenuating it. We can also kill the whole virus and then inject it in people, and they're able to boost their immune system. That used to be the old technique we used to create the polio virus, the vaccine. We created also the measles with that technique. We created several other vaccines. Then later on, the idea of using a protein. We go into the virus and get just a little part of it, which is a protein, and we're able to inject that protein, and we're able to boost the immune system to actually respond to that. And recently, we got into viral vectors, which is something which people in the anti-vaccine world don't understand very well. You do have viruses that do not harm humans. There are several viruses that do not harm humans. There are viruses that cause a common cold. We know them. We're able to take this genetic material and attach it to these particular viruses, and we're able to deliver, we use them as a vehicle to deliver the genetic material. And finally, we do have genetic material that has just recently been used, which is an RNA vaccine. We'll talk about this. It's very safe. I do not want to say there will be no side effect, but it's a very safe technology. It's one of the safest vaccines we have.
Yeah, I think we'll go to the details of that subsequently. You touched a little bit on the second question I was going to ask, but I will still do because you touched on part of it and you didn't touch on part of it. And this question will be directed to Dr. Eugene Ateh. So, Dr. Eugene, I know you work on some of these projects, especially in animals. So, how are vaccines designed? And the second part of the question was going to be the different types of vaccines, which Munoh has already addressed. But you have anything, you feel free to add.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Dr. Agbo. Dr. Foma did a fantastic job giving a basic explanation and understanding of how vaccine works. And basically, this protection that a vaccine gives is because your cells in your body, they pick up either the dead viruses or the inactivated viruses, and they start producing substances that either block the harmful virus or harmful bacteria from getting entry into your system. So basically, Moderna and Pfizer, they decided to develop a delivery system whereby they attach the genetic material of the infectious agent to an mRNA. RNAs are just the building blocks. That's what your cell uses to produce proteins. So what an mRNA virus does is, it's just a natural substance that will direct your protein production in your cells throughout the body towards a specific sequence that is attached to it. So basically, every cell of yours is transformed into an on-demand drug factory. So basically, what they do with these substances that they intend to put into humans they always do what we call preclinical studies in animals.
Yep.
And that's where we come in.
Yeah.
We use mice, we use rats, we use non-human primates, we use ferrets, we use basically any animal model that we think will be able to give some results that could be translated to humans. It's not easy because 95% of studies that were found very effective in animals, when you translate to humans, you get a major roadblock because mice are not human. Now they've moved on to the use of non-human primates against the wishes of people who are against the use of animals for biomedical studies. Like Dr. Foma said, no substance that you put into your system is harmless, but it is safe. Safe in that the good that that substance does into your system outweighs the bad. Like we all know, there are people who are even allergic to air. There are people who are allergic to water. There are people who will not even take the basic peanut that we take for granted.
Granite.
Granite, yep.
Yeah.
People will not even be able to eat it. Some people in the US will not eat it. We grow in the village where during the pollen season, we see maize pollen all over. And back home, we used to call them katanos pekin, katanos, but that is allergy to pollen. Some of us are not. So once we do these studies in animals, we call it now translational medicine. You get a group of scientists who will be able to translate the outcome in animals to humans. And we should understand that within 10 months, they could come out with a vaccine, not because they played around the science, but because of the huge amount of money that was pumped into this effort.
Yeah, I think that's something we are going to discuss extensively later. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah. So in animals, we use what we call human ages based on the type of animal. For example, if you're working with a mice, a 1-month-old mice is equivalent to a 14-year-old child. If you're using a 20-month-old mice, that is equivalent to about a 2-year-old child. So within 10 months, you could actually study what is happening in a human being of 50 years. And because of the rapid generation time, you could actually study in animals the potential effect of any substance on the future generation. So that is the role of animal studies when it comes to vaccine and medicine development.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Eugene Ateh. Alison and I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
Yes, so I just want to continue from where Dr. Ateh stopped. Once that research is done at the animal level, then we move over to we start phase 1 clinical trials, which is usually carried out in about 10 to 100 people. And the goal of this is to verify for the safety of these drugs. That's really the goal of a phase 1 clinical trial. It's a little number of people that we test this drug on their volunteers. We already know it's safe in animals, so we do test it on these people. We also do a phase 2 clinical trial, which is now between like 200 to at least about almost 20 to 100 people usually. It can go above that to even 200 to 1,000, where the goal of a phase 2 clinical trial is actually for safety again, and also to look at the immunogenicity. How does this virus affect the body, and how does the body affect the virus? Or what happens when you give this vaccine? The third phase is usually the phase where we look at efficacy, which we have done right now. This is what has come out. And we also use this for regulatory approvals. And there is always a continuous phase no one talks about, which is a phase 4, which we continue to monitor. What happened with the Moderna, with the Pfizer, with the Sanofi Adventist, with all these trials that were going on, as Dr. Ateh said, billions of dollars have been poured in. So phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials could go on simultaneously, safely. Also, governments could get into manufacturing development without the fear of losing money. Everything is about money. Economists will tell you that.
Yeah.
Nobody invests in things where they will not make money. Majority of these trials will fail. We all know that as scientists, just 2% will be very low with the coronavirus. Majority will fail, so they don't want to put money into something that is going to fail. So there was money available. People could go wild, and they did go wild, and science actually triumphed at the end of it. So this is a big triumph to science, and it's actually something we need to celebrate. I'm very pleased to be a scientist at this time of my, well, maybe I should have come maybe in the next 200 years, but I'm pleased to be around at this time, and it's something which I'm really pleased to talk about.
Yeah.
Great.
So maybe just to add to what Dr. Foma and Dr. Tata have said, by now you would have already seen that the successful development and rollout of a vaccine, right from the, having just the concepts to having it distributed to our mothers, our brothers, in the street, involves a wide range of people with different capacities. So you have people who work at the molecular level, at the initial stages. Then you have people who are more into trying to understand how the immune system works and responds to these things. You have people who are at the forefront of running these clinical trials, from epidemiologists to statisticians. You have the doctors who are there to take care of people who get ill from these vaccines should they arise. And then you have, even after the vaccine has been given, people who follow up these vaccines. In fact, even just the process of manufacturing it and distributing it into the community involves a very complex supply chain with different aspects being taken into consideration. The good thing about the pandemic is that it was able to rally these different groups of experts together in a very, successful way. So it shows a powerful intersectoral collaboration across different expertise, across different areas, even of health, either pure research or people who are doing just other aspects of it. So it's been such a great and successful process of rallying people together to get this done.
Great, thank you very much. So Harry will be asking the next question. I know he has a strong interest in the second part, but I think he still needs to understand the science.
Thank you, doctors. It's a pleasure to share a platform with doctors that are actually the frontline workers trying to protect us. I'm actually Harry Fun. I apologize for jumping on the panel late. I've had an exchange with Dr. Ateh. I know myself and Dr. Foma were friends, but we don't really communicate back and forth on Facebook. I'm new to Dr. Alison, so it's a pleasure to be in the same panel with you guys. So, and I just wanted to correct one thing that Dr. Ateh said at the end, at the entrance of his introduction. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm more in the line of what Dr. Alison, looking at her portfolio, I hesitate with vaccines. I don't play with vaccines with my kids. I give them all their vaccines. I mean, I space them out. Just on me, personally, I hesitate. I need to know because, like Terrence said, the history. We're going to talk about why the Black community hesitates with vaccines, and that's now that we do have a vaccine that is rolling out. That's going to be the important part of this conversation, because we have a vaccine, and they're looking at statistics right now. 46% of the Black population is not ready to take it. So I'm more so in the hesitating column as opposed to an anti-vaxxer. So I just wanted to put that, because I've had a long history with Dr. Ateh on vaccinations, and he thinks I just hate them. No, I don't. All right. So Dr. Alison, could you tell us about
hold on, just before you, okay, so that is question 3, is that correct?
Yeah, I was going to develop on question 4,
just
but
making sure, yes.
We should go back on question 3.
Yes.
All right. So I know there are a lot of companies like Dr. Foma Code that are working right now. But could you tell us a little bit more about the different COVID vaccines that have been designed currently, and which ones are leading? Like, which are the vaccines that are out there? And tell us all the difference. I know there's something about Pfizer. For a layman, could you just let us understand what's going on right now? We know the FDA has approved one company. We don't know which company it is. There was set an approval, I think, on Friday. Could you just give us a breakdown of what, for a layman, what is going on in the vaccine world right now?
Okay, so thanks for that question. I'm going to start by saying one thing that was able to help the whole vaccine development process is that as soon as this outbreak occurred, as a result of advance in technology and as a result of collaboration between countries, China, where the pandemic started, rapidly shared the genetic sequence for the virus, and this helped to accelerate vaccine development. And at the start, scientists were thinking, what is it that we've known based on our experience with working in vaccines that is going to help accelerate the vaccine development process? So get a vaccine that's in a fast way, that's affordable, that works, and that is safe. And the first thing is to try to look at existing vaccines and to see, okay, in the past, we've developed vaccines through this method and they seem to work. So the first, the rapid, or the first ones that people dived into were like, either the what you call the live attenuated vaccines or the inactivated vaccines. And the reasons they went for these ones is because they seem to be, easily or rapidly, they could work on them easily, and they were hoping this is going to work. The good thing about these vaccines as well is that they have a tendency, or they're able to stimulate an immune response through different mechanisms. And they were hoping, well, if we use these vaccines as they've been used for other existing vaccines, hopefully they're going to work well, they're going to be potent, and they're going to be safe. But these vaccines are good, and they come with their own challenges. They come with their own good sides and not so good sides. And you would say, well, why would you go ahead and use such a strategy? If you have fought, let's say if you've gone to war with a country, or you've gone to war with a family, for example, and you fought these people successfully, you fight one member of the family, let's say you win the war, then you meet another member of that family. Even though people of the same family are different in the way they would respond to a situation, at least the probability that there might be some similarities is high. And the good thing is you're not starting from scratch. So, they use existing platforms. Then they started looking at other platforms that could work. So they looked at other groups of vaccines, like what you would call the adeno derived vaccines, such as the Oxford vaccine that we're looking at. And these are groups of vaccines which have specific ways of working, and which, maybe for the sake of our audience, I think diving too much into the immunological aspects of it might not really be necessary. But then they've considered using adeno derived vaccines, such as the Oxford vaccines. You have vaccines that are made using DNA material. So, DNA material here, we're looking at like our famous Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccines. And these are vaccines that are made using like, genetic material from the virus, which is induced and tries to get your body to develop a powerful immune response to these to the infections once your body comes in contact with them. And those are some of the leading vaccines. So the ones that have been approved, you have the Pfizer's vaccine, which has been proven to be about 95% effective, and it's been rolled out in a couple of countries already. Coming up very strongly behind, you have the Moderna. So these are both under like a big heading of DNA vaccines that are produced from DNA material, even though they have slightly different ways of acting, and they've been shown to be safe and efficacious. Some would argue that maybe compared to the Pfizer vaccine, which is the leading one, the Moderna vaccine might be preferred in some settings, because it seems to be more stable depending on different temperatures. And so you would wonder, why should there be continuous research, even though there's already a vaccine that's been, being rolled out under emergency use? It's because each one comes with a different way of acting, and each one brings on board slightly different advantages that are, covered up where others are lacking. So there's continuous need for, looking at how these different vaccines are going to work together. And also, because of the global demand, all these vaccines need to be produced alongside each other to meet up with demand. So the Pfizer vaccine that has been rolled out has the plan is that you need to have 2 doses about 3 weeks apart, and initial studies had really focused on like people 16 years and above. So there's also still gaps of knowledge about how these vaccines would perform in people who are younger, and how these vaccines would perform in more vulnerable populations, and in pregnant women and in children. There are still gaps in terms of what we know about how well these groups of people will tolerate these vaccines. And another thing is, already you can see that having a vaccine that needs to be given 2 doses 3 weeks apart, it has its own implications. Scientists have already warned us that people getting a second dose, for example, might get a slightly more stronger response, and as a result, they might present with slightly more reactions. It doesn't mean it's going to kill them. It's not going to hurt them significantly. The vaccine, how feasible it is. We're looking at the issues of acceptance. Are people going to be able to, and compliance? Are people going to be able to come back for both doses of vaccines that they're required to have? So these are some of the questions that are arising around these vaccines. But the problem is, or the good thing is, the benefits as we stand outweigh the risk and outweigh all these challenges. Yeah. That's why, despite the existing challenges and concerns, we would say you should get your vaccine if if you're in a place where it's already been rolled out. You would encourage people to get the vaccine. The upcoming vaccines, like the Oxford vaccine, the advantage that a lot of people are seeing is that, oh well, it's just a single dose. Just a single dose might be potent enough to generate a very strong immune response. So you don't need to get several doses, which will come with its own advantages. But does it mean this vaccine is going to be like 100% perfect without any concerns? That we cannot tell you. But that is just like a summary of, just to highlight on the main ones that are leading, and just to let you know, even though we started with over tens of different vaccine candidates, those are the ones that seem to stand out for now.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much, Alison. I can just add also, I know a little bit about science, so don't doubt, to me, the audience, don't doubt what I say. Okay, I would also like to mention that Alison also mentioned something at the beginning, that people went back to what worked before. What is important here is that, if you all know, people call the disease COVID-19, but I'm sure you guys have heard the name SARS-CoV-2, so which is a systemic acute respiratory syndrome of COVID-19, or the coronavirus number 2. So when I see number 2, I think for everyone, you should think there has to be a number 1, because you can't just jump. So why I'm giving all this history is that in the early 2000s, there was the first SARS outbreak, which happened, again, it started in China. So when this happened, there was a lot of research and vaccine development that was done at the beginning. The current, when they did a sequence, so the structure of that last virus and the current one, they are very close. So people could easily go back to the technology and what they had left. Okay, so before I even go there, so why they didn't continue to progress with the development of vaccine for SARS-CoV-1 or the first coronavirus, was because eventually the disease disappeared. As you all know, in this business of science, if you put money, you need money on the other side. So no one was willing to invest more without having any outcome, but the technology was still there. So it was, when this happened, it was easy for people to go back, for all these scientists to go back to what they really had, and with the close similarity between the two viruses, to progress from there, the development of another virus. So that was why it was quite quick to progress for the development of virus. And then another thing I want to make a little bit clear, I know Dr. Wiyeh has explained, Dr. Ateh has explained. I just want to add that in the body, because I know a little bit about molecular biology, so I will just try to explain it further. So in the human body, and why I'm doing this is because I've heard a lot of people saying DNA is going to change genetics. So in the human body, you have the genes which basically have DNA. So these genes are converted to a protein called transcription to RNA. This RNA can then be converted to another process called translation. So you translate it to the proteins. It is this protein that form the backbone of all our body. So it starts from gene or DNA. The DNA can divide several times, and then it will then give you, eventually it can then transcribe or it's converted to RNA. The RNA is what eventually gives you the protein. The RNA usually, for protein to be synthesized, it's usually in a part of the cell which is outside the nucleus where the gene is. It's outside part of where the gene is. So it is very important for us to have this information. So you have from DNA to RNA to proteins, which eventually, from when you hear about the vaccines, it is these proteins that body recognizes and generates an immune system, an immune response against them. So just to go further about the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. So we all the speakers have mentioned that these vaccines are RNA vaccines or messenger RNA vaccines. So messenger RNA is a RNA which is eventually converted or translated to proteins. So it is this RNA. So in the body, there are different kinds of RNA. One carries protein, one is involved in the correct arrangement of the nucleotides or molecules that form proteins. So the one that is actually converted to proteins is what is called messenger RNA. So what Pfizer and Moderna did is they put this messenger RNA into some vehicles. So you hear people say they were carried in lipid nanoparticles. So these lipid nanoparticles are vehicles, and the reason is because the messenger RNA cannot just pass into the cell. The cell membrane, so your body, what covers the cells of your body is made up of a lot of lipids. So water cannot cross it. That is why when we shower, water doesn't cross it. So then they put them on these lipid particles, which are vehicles. So these lipid particles are able to carry the RNA across your body. When they are injected, they are able to carry across your cell membrane into the cytoplasm, the part of the body where protein transcription or the the RNA translation or the protein synthesis will take place. And at that point, remember, I have not called the gene. It doesn't go to the nucleus. It is just the protein. And eventually what would happen, what your body will do is it will then synthesize or produce this protein. Like I think Dr. Eugene Ateh and Dr. Foma mentioned that our bodies were just made as small indoor systems. So our bodies will then make these proteins. And because they are foreign, the body now, as Dr. Foma mentioned in his first answer to the response, our body now will recognize them as foreign. This doesn't belong to me, and then mount a defense mechanism, an immune response, which will then fight against the virus. So basically, that is the deeper scientific part of it. I try to make it as basic as possible. I hope I did.
Yeah. Let me just add something. I totally agree with what Dr. Alison and Dr. Agbo have said concerning the mRNA virus, but I just want to add a little bit of historical perspective to this. As Trey Katos asked, Moderna is a new word that combines modified and RNA. That is a small company that started 10 years ago, building on the research of a Hungarian researcher called Catalina Carico. She's been working on this mRNA stuff for more than 3 decades. Then there is also one very tiny company in Germany that's owned or started by a North African called BioNTech. BioNTech just means biopharmaceutical new technology. So Pfizer bought BioNTech, and BioNTech and Moderna, they were working on this mRNA molecular delivery of substances. The initial plan for mRNA was not even to develop a vaccine for COVID. What one scientist found out is that scientists have always been using embryonic stem cells. And we got these embryonic stem cells from fetuses, from dead fetus of 14, 15, 18 weeks old. So because of the resistance to use fetus, and because of the ethical thing of picture of injecting a dead fetus into somebody, this mRNA technology, they were trying to use it to see whether they could reprogram mature cells to revert to embryonic stem cells.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next application they tried to use this mRNA was to see whether they could reprogram cells to produce enzymes that are lacking in some rare genetic diseases.
Mm-hmm.
Another form was they wanted to use mRNA to see whether they could deliver growth substances that if you have a damaged heart, they can inject you with an mRNA attached to a molecule that will cause your damaged heart to produce healthy heart tissues. So in 1990, this technology was actually successfully developed on the mice. So the mouse cells were programmed with mRNA to produce proteins that scientists want.
Mm-hmm.
So when COVID broke out a year ago, and immediately, one beautiful thing they did in China is they produced the genetic code of this virus. And immediately, within 6 weeks, Moderna was able to attach it to an mRNA, and they could go ahead and start clinical trials. So it was like, it's not like this technology was developed 10 months ago for COVID. So it is something that scientists have been working on, and it's like the time came for it to be used, and it was used. Moderna, to be very sincere, has never produced any vaccine. They don't have any licensed product on the market. BioNTech has no licensed product in the market. But Pfizer has 171 years of research. So Pfizer bought BioNTech, and that's where we are now. So the rush nature of the vaccine cannot be linked to the fact that scientists rushed something. Nothing was rushed here. It's just that money came into play, and the money was used judiciously by scientists to meet the current need of the world. Which is
that actually answers my next question, because for you all, one of the biggest concerns raised by some people out there is that these vaccines did not go through the normal development stages of a vaccine and the stringent testing procedure as well as protocol for vaccine development. So I think you've answered part of the question, but I will go ahead and ask the question, and any of you, please feel free to jump in if you have anything to add. So could you explain why scientists and pharmaceutical companies were able to achieve this within a very short period of time?
So, Terence, I know I would take you back a bit, because we're extremely scientific. I was really the point of, if our audience really understood what was really going on here. It's important for us to go to as basic things as possible.
Yeah.
I would like to take you to the analogy of a library, where you do have a library with books. And those books in that library is our DNA, where we have it stored. And I decide one day I want to make another library somewhere in Furawa in Cameroon. I need to build the infrastructure, create a library, and all of that. What a messenger RNA is that I decide one day I want to copy a page of a cookery book, a book on how to bake banana cake. I go into that library, I take the book out, and I photocopy that page. That is what is called transcription. Then I take that page out, and I'm going to translate it into a protein. And I'm going to get the ingredients and make a protein and make banana cake. That is a message which they are introducing in the body to make a protein, which is like making banana cake. That message is what Moderna are introducing into the cell. The cell has everything in the universe to make whatever it wants to make, because the universal codes are universal, as we used to say. Those who know, you know that very well in basic science. So we're able to make that protein which we have designed, and the body can actually fight it. I just wanted to summarize this for people to know it's kind of something you can visualize, see it happen. There are other strategies that have been used, as Alison said. In this same war, I'm going to use it as a war against coronavirus, we decided to use weakened viruses, which is like an old method. It was used by others. We decided to use proteins, which is also the same method as using a messenger RNA, because at the end, the messenger RNA makes clean proteins, which are not manufactured. It's easy, it's made faster, you can scale it up, you can do as many vaccines as possible within a very short time. That's actually what makes this technology very enticing. And I see us coming out of this technology with a lot of things, even for HIV. I'm seeing a good perspective for science going forward. Now, going to your question, I'm sorry for taking you back.
Yes, that's fine. That's actually fine. We need the audience to understand.
Yeah, going to the question of why and how this was done rapidly, and how the scientific world succeeded in actually making a vaccine within a very short period of time, goes to the fact that we have, Dr. Tata said something. During this pandemic, there has been a lot of cooperation. Alison said the same thing. The Chinese were able to do a sequencing of this virus by January 9th.
Yeah.
They shared it to the world. They did not make any patterns to it. They made it public to every scientist in the world. During that same, on the 10th of January, a paper came out in New England Journal actually talking about therapies that could target this protein, and was published also to everybody. Scientists in Austin had already gone ahead to use photospectrometry in order to understand this particular virus, and they were able, the different proteins, and they were able to identify that the spike proteins, which we had known, as you said, for the COVID, this was not the first SARS virus. There was the one, there was the two, there was the MERS, and then there was the COVID SARS-2. And they were able to identify that it gets into the cell using the ACE2 inhibitors. And this is how things move so fast. There was transparency in the field of science. The second thing is that there was money that was made available. Governments were being threatened. Our lives as normal has changed. The US government, the European Union, the Canadian government, the Australian government, South Korea, China, everybody poured money into this. In particular, we need to, there are other people who need, like, there was a lot of good work that was done by even the Trump administration. They went ahead and told pharmaceutical companies, you are not going to lose anything. We're going to take care of the preclinical phase, all what you will lose if you try to do research at that level. We are going to take care of the infrastructures that you will need to put in place in order to manufacture this virus, these vaccines quickly. We are going to sponsor the phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. Once you get any losses out of this, we're going to prepay for the vaccines even when you fail. We're going to command them, pay for them, even if they come out and they don't work. So this made every company which had the potential of doing research freelance into it. And finally, we have something. I know the others will have, I don't want to keep talking, the others will have a lot to add to this. So I think it's been a wonderful ride.
Great. So I think, Alison, do you have anything to add, or should we move to the next question?
I think we can move to the next question.
Okay, so this question, so this question is going to be asked by Tres. He has a very strong interest, but before he moves on, you remember you had mentioned to me, and all of you actually mentioned to me, that you saw the poll I had on my wall on whether or not people will take the COVID-19 vaccine. And so this moves us to the next part of the program. So part 2, which is the vaccine hesitancy pushing. So, Harry, Trace.
Yeah, so it's really targeted to Dr. Alison because it says you do have a background of working with vaccine hesitancy, which is actually a thing, right? A lot of people don't know that that's actually a thing, that people do hesitate because of our history. If you remember with the Tuskegee experiment, and on the 2nd of September of this year, the AP reported that the UN, the new oral polio vaccines were part of the new polio spikes in Sudan, right? And so when people read stuff like that, then they start to hesitate and be like, okay, that is a polio, like Dr. Foma said earlier, he did talk about the polio, eradication of polio, but now we're saying that the oral polio vaccine is actually creating a new spike of polio. That's not my question. I'm going to develop my question. The yearly rate of death in America is 2,839,205. That's every year. That's the number of people that die in America. And I'll break it down. I'll just give three. The major cause of death is heart disease with 655,381. You get the point. Cancer second, 599, 274,000. And the third, accidental driving and everything in between, 167,000. If you add that number down, it gives you that 2 million. Right now with COVID, for 1 year, we are at 305,000 as of today, 586 deaths. And that stands at 0.9% of the US population. That's just the US population. We're not looking at anything else. On Friday, like I said earlier, Pfizer applied for the emergency use authorization for the COVID vaccine. When you look at this data, when you look at this number, and people look at it, I look at it, and I'm saying that, okay, I mean, I don't want 300,000 people to die, but I see why people hesitate to take this, because for them, looking at this number, we're not in an emergency, but we see companies pushing for a crisis, shutting down. In Sweden, especially, they did not shut down. They're operating normally. We could have worn masks and we could have gone out and operate normally. Do you understand why people?
Yes. Sorry for it. Just before you proceed, Sweden has actually shut down as of last week.
Okay, so we take
it
that
was
out.
Very, very bad there. Just to clarify that, yeah.
Okay, we take that out of the equation. But do you see, Dr. Alison, looking at these statistics, why people would hesitate to take a vaccine that kind of like has been rushed through the emergency authorization process, which they had to go through FDA, and 3 people in that council did object to approving the vaccine. The vaccine was approved. They're going to start launching on Monday, most of it this week. So do you see and understand, and then explain the history in the Black community, why people hesitate, and looking at data like this to hesitate?
Thank you. I think you've touched on very, very important things, and I'm really excited as we're diving into the second part. So the first thing I'm going to say is, even the whole term vaccine hesitancy, I think that's the way it's coined in the literature. But there's this great discussion among experts around really how, if it's the ideal word to use, because it kind of groups people into this hesitant group of people who don't want to have anything to do with vaccines versus the scientists, in brackets, open and close, who sit there using a top-down approach, trying to tell people you have to take this. 5 years back, before I really dived into, trying to understand what's happening about why people would not want to take vaccines, I would have told you these people are crazy. Why would you say no to an intervention that's out there that has the potential to change lives, to save lives? But when you start to try to understand what's going on, you realize that what I feel for people who question these things is I listen to them. I have a lot of empathy for those who think that they've experienced adverse events as a result of these vaccines, and those who truly have. But then I'm ready to engage in these discussions with the hope that people come onto the table with an open mind versus trying to, it's about trying to understand each other's perspectives versus trying to say, well, science is crap, vaccines don't work. Now, back to your statistics, I think it would be a good place from where we can start. The diseases you've mentioned, which seem to be at the top in terms of mortality and morbidity in the US. So whether it's cardiovascular diseases or it's cancer or it's, injury, we are looking at more lifestyle related diseases. which, despite having a significant burden, the rate at which they spread is not the same. For me to develop diabetes or hypertension, I just don't get up someday and I develop these things. These things come over years. Hypertension and diabetes will not kill you today. So you don't become hypertensive today and it kills you today. But with COVID, you get COVID, you can die within a couple of hours or a couple of days. Hypertension and diabetes, I would not there are some aspects and say that will say, well, if I have a strong history of hypertension and diabetes in my family, the chance that I'm going to get it, depending on what types it is, it's a little higher than someone who doesn't. But traditionally or normally, I would not transmit hypertension and diabetes to my child or to my neighbor or to my family member with whom I'm living in the house. But with COVID, it's different. When you come in contact with someone, you have a risk of, the person stands a risk of being infected. So the mechanisms by which these diseases occur are different. The mechanisms by which they spread, which is even the biggest fear, are different. So the potential damage that these diseases can cause are different. COVID-19, if nothing was done, if all the public health measures were not put in place, when you look at people who model the outcomes of diseases, I'm telling you that this pandemic would have had the potential to erase, you don't know what proportion of the surface of the earth. So the mechanisms by which these diseases occur and spread are completely different. And the reason COVID-19 is being prioritized, it is not because governments are underlooking research or diabetes or cardiovascular diseases, or it's not because these other conditions are being overlooked. In fact, before COVID came into place, there's been research and interventions going on in all these areas. But the reason that you seem to feel like COVID-19 is getting a lot of attention is because it is being prioritized. You set priorities at a particular point in time based on the potential outcome of doing nothing. It has to be prioritized. Now, regarding the perspectives of Black communities, let me tell you, my brother, it's not just among Black Americans. Let's even go back home to Cameroon. Let's start unpacking the literature as far as the 90s. The issues of vaccine hesitancy did not start today. They started right from when vaccines were being developed in the times of Jenner. But in our context, the Cameroon context, because my assumption here is based on the fact that most of our audience is probably of Cameroonian origin, and we will think, oh, there's no vaccine hesitancy in our context. Let's start right from the 90s. During the times of the Ville War, it's documented in literature, in scientific publications, where you had young girls run out of classes because they were being administered, especially in the Northwest regions, they were being administered vaccines against tetanus. But the rumor that went around is that, no, these vaccines have been used to sterilize these girls. That the vaccines are being used to sterilize these girls. And then the girls said, no, we don't want these vaccines. So people have concerns over vaccines. And I completely understand with people's concerns. They are valid concerns at times. Because, to be honest with you, the history of vaccine development has not always been so clean. There have been mistakes that have been made in the past. There have been mistakes that still continue to be made till today. But if we keep saying, I'm not going to take a vaccine because a mistake happened, then we are losing out. If you eat Ndole today, Ndole sends you to the toilet. Are you going to say, I'm not going to eat Ndole again because Ndole sent me to the toilet? No, you won't do that. What you're going to say is what went wrong with the cooking process of this Ndole to make sure that the next time I'm encountering this Ndole, it does not send me to the table, to the toilet. So you start looking at the challenges. Like I said, you've seen already that vaccine development involves different groups of people, right from the time when you're still proving the concept to developing the vaccine to rolling it out. At times, the whole process of proving the concept, developing the vaccine can go really well at the level of laboratory, but then at the level of trials, things start going wrong. It even gets even worse at the process of getting the vaccine through the supply chain to the people and implementing the vaccination campaigns, from how well you communicate with people, from how well you tell them, you manage the side effects. All of these have potentials at each point in time to raise concerns, and people have valid concerns, but we have to come to the table with the mindset that says we are ready to from both sides look at the challenges that our vaccination programs face, acknowledge that there may be challenges, but that there are good sides of it. Try to make things better instead of saying, I'm not going to take a COVID-19 vaccine because, the pharmaceutical companies are the ones gaining, or traditionally we Black populations have been used as guinea pigs for research, or Bill Gates is on an agenda to sterilize the whole of Africa, bringing on board all these conspiracy theories. Then it blocks us because at the end of the day, the benefits of getting these vaccines far, far, far outweigh the risk. And if a COVID vaccine comes to my door today, if I hear it's in my neighborhood, I'm on the queue at 4 a.m. to get it.
So, Tres, I want to debug some things, but it's not really to debug it. I want you to understand data. Data is presented in a way that we tend to be skewed even by the way data is presented. Like you told us, the number of people who die from cardiovascular diseases. Do you know the way it's counted? If I have a heart attack, even if that heart attack is due to COVID, because I had viral and myocarditis, it's going to be counted as a heart attack. So you should be very careful at times when you look at data. And I would like to tell you, I like to show what vaccines have done, because those who are hesitant forget what it has done. In 1918, the flu pandemic killed more people than the World War I and II combined in 1 year. I don't know if you know that statistic. We forget it. We just forget easily. The smallpox used to cause indentations in skins of children and people all over the world. It has caused about 400 million deaths. Do you know about the plague? When you hear about a plague, somebody calls something a plague, you can imagine what it is, how this is going to destroy people. We forget things that have happened. Once you call a country a developed country, these are countries that have learned to deal with infectious diseases and control them. Going back to Africa, where both of us are from, if we had invested the world, if we had a vaccine for malaria, you could imagine how much we're going to neglect talking about malaria tomorrow. 10% of cancers that we're talking about are caused by viruses. In Australia today, Australia is about to eradicate cervical, anal, throat, and penile cancers because of giving women and boy children vaccine against the papilloma virus.
That is HPV, yeah.
These are things we know work. I'll give you an example. If this vaccine, those who are hesitant about vaccine have a reason to be hesitant, because it's a debate. Usually they put it as a debate between feelings and facts. As scientists, we've been very poor at communicating. It's one of the reasons we come in, we feel we are gods, we go into Cameroon, we try to vaccinate our kids, we don't get any informed consent, we start vaccinating them. And because there is lack of information, there is lack of understanding the socio-economic setup, the psychological, geopolitical situation which is going on at that time, we get into people using that situation to spread a rumor which we cannot take, because it goes with feelings. You cannot convince someone who has a feeling about something with scientific facts. That's what I think. I strongly believe that. So it's not even supposed to go that way. You need to, as Alison put it this way, you need to get to understand where this is coming from. Like, if I am growing up and I've never met autism before, and I start vaccinating children around the age of 3 months right up to 2 years, that's the age where autism is diagnosed. The way the human mind works is by pattern recognition. Psychologists will tell you that you recognize patterns. So you're like, oh, I gave my child vaccine at 3 months, now he's having autism, because so vaccines cause autism, or autism are related to vaccines. Then that is what you call pattern recognition. Then the mind fixes that. It's the same thing. It's very difficult because we created cars. Someone will tell you seatbelts kill people, because that correlation of putting on a seatbelt can kill you. Yeah, it can. But it's because I wore a seatbelt and I had an accident and died doesn't mean the seatbelt killed me.
Yeah.
Really, that's really how these arguments are. But I'm not going into the position of wanting to convince. I'm going into a position of wanting to have a dialogue.
Yeah.
Getting to understand why people think the way they do. And trying for us as scientists to be able to understand this group of people and see how we can convince or get to discuss with them the importance of vaccination.
Yeah.
All right. Let me just add something. totally agree what Alison and Foma have just said. And Alison actually tried to bring it down to our context in Cameroon, within our generation. I remember the scare Alison talked about where young girls were jumping out of classrooms because they were about to be vaccinated against tetanus and they said they were coming to sterilize them. If you look 20, 30 years backward, these same young girls who were vaccinated are here popping out babies like rabbits. So the vaccine didn't work, number one. Number two, one of the greatest problems that we will face with this COVID vaccine is that of trust. I know Trekatos framed it as a black man. If you look at us in Cameroon, we don't trust our government. So this is a time where community participation should be at its most. In those days, we used to trust our community leaders, like our funds. But back in Cameroon, these people have all been politicized to the level that they do everything to maintain the current regime in place instead of taking care of theirs. So when we're talking about this hesitancy and we're looking at our own context, our Cameroonian context, it is unfortunate that on this forum, now we have just some of us in the diaspora. And we know what those in the diaspora have done to that country called Cameroon in the past 4 years. How do we build back this trust within our community so that it can look at some of us in the diaspora as somebody who will bring back some meaningful changes or some meaningful ideas that will help their community and not help destroy the fabrics of our community in Cameroon?
Yeah.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
Hey,
First, let me just add something. Yeah. So, Alison, I was first. Thank you very much for sharing that article with me. Like exactly what is happening now everywhere is the same thing that happened at that time in Cameroon, and the issue of trust is fundamental. But I wasn't going to sit quiet without mentioning this. Immediately after that vaccination campaign, the outcome of the study was a significant increase in teenage pregnancies because all young girls. There was no way I wasn't going to say this. Yeah, the outcome was that after all that rumor of sterilization, all the young girls who were vaccinated, they went to test the effectiveness of the sterilizing vaccine. And then another thing, I think like some of the people watching and most of us watching and most of us here live in the western part of the world. So it is very important for me to also mention here that vaccine hesitancy, as Alison mentioned, it is not only in our communities. It is not only in our countries. I mean, it didn't even start in our country. It was a big scandal in the UK around the 1850s when the smallpox vaccine was produced by Edward Jenner. When I think Dr. Munoh mentioned clearly that it was people who were infected with cowpox who did not develop smallpox when it came. So what Jenner did was that he thought, okay, yeah, maybe cowpox, which doesn't infect humans, will protect you against smallpox. So he started by using cowpox to infect humans, to protect them. That was working until the government mandated vaccination against smallpox. And then that is when everybody went rogue. There were newspaper articles at that time that published vaccination and a head of a cow, which means you get the vaccine against smallpox, you are going to become a cow. You turn into the cow. So that is where that aspect of our communication comes about. And like Dr. Munoh mentioned, I think we as scientists, but not only scientists, because I think we are giving scientists here a lot of work. I think the entire public, the opinion leaders, the politicians, community leaders, they need to at least speak with some of these scientists and transmit their information, because sometimes it is usually quite difficult for me to have someone I don't know to convince me about something I don't know about.
That's true.
Maybe I'll just add, maybe Trace, before I just to wrap to add a point. So we were looking at, we came across this study that was done by Chai back in Cameroon, and they're looking at the vaccination coverage in the north and southwest regions with the ongoing pandemic, and there has been a significant drop in vaccination coverage because people are asking themselves. Let's even forget the whole political chaos that is ongoing in these parts of the country. People are asking themselves if the government, most of these vaccines are given in like your health center, the mother will take her child there. If the same government is, burning houses based on what we know, I'm not going to take sides, it's not a political debate, but if people feel if the government is burning houses and killing people, why should they care about us getting vaccinated against preventable diseases? In fact, people will tell you, I have family in the northwest region, they'll tell you someone is sick now, they're even scared to go to the hospital because they say, oh, they hear that the government is using like health structures or health personnel, especially in public hospitals, to kill the local people, especially people they think are key opinion leaders with regards to the ongoing civil strife. So this issue of confidence in our context is key. And unfortunately, we cannot, I wish there was a way we could disentangle politics from some of our healthcare interventions. It would just make life a lot easier. And unfortunately, it is everywhere. We cannot disentangle it. We cannot. Even in the US, you're reading an article and they're telling you that the authorization, the emergency use authorization for Pfizer was supposed to be, sent out, I think, by the FDA, probably was supposed to be rather yesterday. But because of orders that came from the White House, looks like it was sent out on Friday. That's like, you're picking up that in the media. And you as a layperson, you're wondering, but hold on, why should the presidency put so much pressure on the FDA to send out this emergency use authorization? So there's this, web between politics, between people's perceptions, between reality, which just, makes the waters muddy and further, degrades the amount of confidence that a lot of people have, especially if you're dealing with a regime that people don't trust. These are complex things that unfortunately are real. And the research that needs to be done might not even be done by us sitting in this panel, because most of us are probably clinicians or laboratory people, anthropologists, sociologists, people who do work with the communities. Those are the people who are supposed to be leading the way. So if I have people in the audience listening whose areas of interest and work are in the fields of sociology, anthropology, psychology, these are the people who are supposed to be leading these things, because we're beginning to understand that it's a complex web of issues that happen around people's perceptions that are causing all these concerns around whether these things truly are safe and efficient for the populations.
Yeah, so I want to add something, Alison. It's in communication, it's been said. If I tell each and every one of you to donate money to help a village, majority of the people will not donate it.
Yeah.
If I tell you to donate money to help a child who has a broken hand or who has had a cancer, and I show you a picture, majority of the population will donate the money. It goes in the same way, the way communication goes with vaccines. Why? Those who come in with things that have happened to them, some of them are real, but they are individual cases, they are case reports. But those case reports are amplified. I took the COVID vaccine was given to about 100,000 people in the UK on day one. 2 people had anaphylactic shock reaction. 2. Those 2 became news. Do you know why? We are good. Our minds are wired to remember negative things and amplify them.
That's true.
Our minds are not wired to understand the good things and keep them. If you're doing an intervention when no one gets sick, everyone forgets about those people who don't get sick. They remember the people who get adverse events, and the families who actually have those children get to actually be passionate, because it's about passion. It's about feelings. It's about passion about what happened to their child. And the debate is lost because we're trying to look at it as a debate, and we're trying to present them statistics. It's no longer a statistic, it becomes someone's child.
Yep.
And that is how they present it. And that is how everyone is just like that donation. Everyone who sympathizes with that child who has a big Burkitt's lymphoma, everyone sympathizes with them and says, this could happen to my child too. And they get into the same habit and they forget about what the good this whole vaccine may have done. That is why it's important, as you said, for anthropologists, for sociologists, for psychologists to understand how our brains work. And I don't have a problem with vaccine, those who are hesitant to vaccination. There are three groups of people: those who are vaccine champions, those who are in the middle, like stress cattle, they are not hesitant. I don't want to say it. If he's hesitant, he's not going to vaccinate his kids.
No, he is.
And you have those who are hesitant who go their way to convince other people not to vaccinate their kids. Those are the people who are dangerous. But I don't want to call them dangerous. But it's those group of people that we really need to sit down with and try to understand where this is coming from. And we cannot do it as scientists, as you said. You said it very well. We need a multidisciplinary approach to get this solved.
Great.
All right, guys. It's been an amazing conversation. And I think we've kind of put together a lot of, we've touched almost every question because we had a series of questions that we were going to ask, and you guys have kind of like touched. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to lump up like 2 or 3 questions, right? Just so we don't kind of repeat the same answer. And the reason I would have left it for Terrence to ask, but I'm following up because
No, I think you should.
Dr. Alison did talk about Cameroon. When I was talking about the hesitancy, my focus was here with the statistics. But in the context of Africa, when the pandemic broke out, one of the biggest donors to Africa, Melissa Gates, put out a quote that we need to rush to Africa because if we don't do anything, 10 million Africans are going to die. Right? That's the number that she actually put out there. She said 10 million Africans are going to die. And Africa was raging and was like, what are you talking about? And then we see the outcome right now. Africa has the lowest amount of death. They do have the COVID, but they're not dying in the numbers that the biggest donor to Africa, the philanthropist Melinda Gates, said. And her husband is also the biggest sponsor of a vaccine. And again, he's pushing the agenda that the first people to get this vaccine should be Africans, right? And Africans are like, we are not having this number of people die. Why are you pressuring us to be the first ones to have this vaccine? Now, can we talk on that aspect a lot? Because Africans are fighting just on that number, not even the issue that's happening behind, but they're looking at, in America, you guys are dying more. Why are you not focused in America? You want Africa to have it. It's with and the vaccine that they're sponsoring is the
AstraZeneca vaccine.
Yes, that one. When that vaccine rolls out, should Africans take it with this particular fear and issue that resides with the Bill Gates Foundation?
Yeah,
and anyone
that's
can jump of it.
You know, the reason why I'm just smiling at is because, you know, when this whole thing about the burden came up, there's been a lot of comments. And when I remember we saw this post by the BBC, where they said that, you know, a couple of vaccine doses had been allocated to the African continent as soon as they become available. And I'm telling you, we went underneath to look at the responses and they were just spot on. So it's not just even Cameroon, it's like a concern across the continent, the African continent. Now, back to your question around what, you know, the statement issued by the Gates Foundation. Trust me, it was not only the Gates Foundation that thought Africa would probably be hit the hardest. And the reason is this. One, you're dealing with a vaccine preventable disease. It's an infectious disease. If you look at how the epidemiology of diseases are across the globe, in the US, in Europe, especially, let's talk about the US, the top diseases, as you've mentioned already, are not infectious diseases, primarily. They are lifestyle-related diseases. In the African continent, if you look at the diseases that kill us the most, you have things like HIV, you have things like malaria. So these tend to be more of your infectious diseases. So I guess, I mean, I'm not in their mind. I really don't know what they were saying, based on what they made that assumption. But my guess would be this. This assumption was based on the fact that infectious diseases are the primary cause of disease of mortality and morbidity in the African continent. So they assumed that, you know, would be hit the hardest. That's one. Number two, our health systems and, you know, are not as organized as health systems in some of these other countries. So it looked like in the US and in Europe, where health systems have been overwhelmed, if we had the same number of cases that are happening in some of these countries, our health systems would not have been able to cope with the disease burden. unable to cope means, a lot of people are losing their lives and a lot of other things are happening. So the other thing is issues of funding. The US is able to fund tests, fund trials, fund research, things, happening very quickly. Many of our countries don't have these resources, whether it's financial resources or personnel. We have acute shortage of healthcare personnel, or it's even equipment or buildings to handle some of these things that would have happened. So I guess in reality, if it is that African continent had faced the same burden as countries in Europe and in the US, we would have been hit harder because our systems were not really prepared. But now it took the whole world by surprise that Africa was not hit as hard as it was hypothesized initially. And there have been several reasons or hypothesized reasons as to why this happened. And Dr. Foma is going to tell you a lot about this. He loves his vitamin D, and he believes that it had an important impact in, coupled with other facts that, generally the African population is a lot younger. Dr. Foma is going to dive into that. I leave that bit for him. I learned a lot about it from him. But now, it's just, all these hypotheses that were made at the start, which unfortunately, or for maybe the people who made those hypotheses didn't turn out to be right. Unfortunately for us, turned out to be actually very wrong, But the truth is, if we had been hit as hard, our health systems would not have been able to cope with the disease burden. And with regards to whether we should take the vaccine because we feel like, oh, well, we're not hit as hard, I would still take the vaccine. We should not be complacent and say, well, we have not been hit as hard. And there are a couple of reasons. To be honest with you, the true burden of COVID-19 within our African context is not known. And this is not known because, the rate at which people are being tested is probably less, because maybe, people get the symptoms, they're even scared to go to the hospital because of all the stigma associated, because at times you even go, the tests are not available. I've got, friends and relatives who work in the healthcare system, and they tell you at times what happens. You're like, oh no, this patient should not have been missed because of all the logistical challenges. And also, even if we don't get the vaccine and COVID still stays within our system, it keeps spreading. It keeps spreading. We cannot tell for sure that the fact that the burden is low now, 3 months or 6 months down the line, it's going to remain low. I would still advocate that if the vaccine comes, we should not be complacent. We should get the vaccine.
Yeah, and Therese, just to mention that there is something that especially everyone loves to do. That I do that most of the time. We like looking at statistics. We like to say out of 500 people who were infected, only 3 people died, and that means it's 0.00001%. So we call people percentages. Nobody should be a percentage. We have to assume that there is a family losing someone. Maybe that person was a breadwinner of that family. So the concept or the idea of using people usually as a statistics, I think that should be discouraged, especially when we are discussing diseases that kill people. In epidemiology, maybe that is the only way they could express themselves. But for people who are quite emotional and usually talking about how vaccine, especially what vaccines can do, I think it is very, very important they also look at those who are infected, those who are dying, not just as a statistic. And then before you proceed to next question, there is a question here which is a very important
Terence, could you just hold on, because I don't want the question to throw Dr.
Okay, sure.
He should develop on the vitamin D that Dr. Alison was saying, and then we would just finish with that one and then take up another question.
Okay, so Terence, there are some things I want to really debunk. I am of the feeling strongly that Africa has not yet had the pandemic the way it's supposed to have. I know Alison knows I've had so many theories about this. I'll explain to you why. Do you know the number of passengers who moved into New York from Europe a day? The number of passengers who land in Atlanta and they moved from Europe a day in New York City is about 1 million people transit. And they did continue to transit from January. If you look at the pattern of the coronavirus, there was a lot of movement. Africa has very few flights. This pandemic was related to how developed you are. The index of development actually shows the level of severity. The most affected country in Africa is South Africa. I used to think a lot of ways so the burden of this disease dealt with how humans move around. So Africa's pandemic is still to come. If Africans become complacent and do not take the vaccine, it's going to be a sad, sad history for Africa. But going back to the point of why was Africa spared, there are all theories which were read. Why Africa was spared? One, we know in the US context, those who are young do not get sick with coronavirus. The median age of the population of Cameroon is about 18 years. If you take everybody's age in Cameroon, divide it, they'll be 18 years. Majority of our population is young. Even if they get coronavirus, they will not be sick. They will not go to the hospital. Majority of our elderly do not live above the age of 45. They die. If you go back home and try to find people who are above 45, my dad is dead. There are a lot of people who are already dead. By the time, I know some few people stay and they live long, and we like quoting those people. That's actually still a form of bias. The next thing I'll talk about is about vitamin D. Alison knows this story. My whole thing, I've been talking about it for a long time. If you look at Black Americans in the US, the reason why and in Europe we're affected the most is because our levels, we have dark skin, our levels of vitamin D are low. I did an experiment in my hospital. We tested everyone for vitamin D. I'm very bad at publishing. They were all low with high COVID. And there is a correlation between vitamin D and the level of severity for COVID-19, how severe it is. It evolved to have dark skin. The white man has the white skin is just because the white man migrated out of the equator, and because he needed vitamin D so badly, his skin color had to change. Over 1 million years, the skin color had to change. It shows you the importance of vitamin D. The third thing people talk about is that Africa being the bread basket of all viruses, we have had multiple coronaviruses before and nobody knew it, nobody tested. So we may have had cross immunity to this coronavirus and we don't know. That is why we may not be getting sick. That's one of the other theories. The next theory is about human population and movement. We don't move a lot the way we move in the US. Even if I'm infected in Bamenda before, 10 million people drive from Bamenda where there's no road now to Yaoundé. It's going to take the whole 200 years for them to move now. I'm going to trade. There are people who will never be able to move with the virus. The virus has a tendency to stay where it is and not move from one place to the other. Multiple millions of people could move across Europe. So that's really some of the theories behind it. But one message I want to pass across is that I am going to take the vaccine. And I want every African to take it because I think the pandemic has not yet reached Africa. That's actually what I believe. And Bill Gates is always misquoted, because he's trying to do good. People hate when you give them things for free. And the psychologists have a way of calling it, if you allocate anything for free, people feel that there is something you're gaining out of it, some alternative gain somewhere. So someone is going to put a theory to that. And that's how we believe all this whole thing, despite the amount of good they have been doing.
All right, let me just add one little thing. Alison and Dr. Foma, you guys gave a wonderful response to Trey Katosi's question. But there is a subtle message which Dr. Foma just mentioned at the end of his response. It is not about what Melinda Gates said about coronavirus in Africa. It is about Bill Gates and Melinda Gates being considered as antichrist. I don't know your, Alison, I don't know your social media presence. But if you belong to the number of social media groups I belong to with lots of Cameroonians, my box is inundated every day with anti-Bill Gates and anti-Melinda Gates messages. Even if she said nothing about this COVID outbreak in Africa, she would have been vilified for not saying anything so that it devastates Africa and they come and make money from Africans. So it is not a message about COVID. It's a message about this loving, philanthropic family.
Yeah,
All right.
you're so right. You're so right, Dr. Shey.
Thank you. And it's very important to clarify that we need these questions answered in the context that you guys are putting it. It's kind of like there's the medical part, and then there's the layman's part, right? And one of the most important things for me to take home is from Dr. Alison's point is when she said we're going to need anthropologists, sociologists, these guys in the communities to go back and like what Dr. Foma just said, we don't just know what happened to Africa. Africa is like an outlier, right? So you guys still need to take the vaccine and just say, you know what, I'm just going to take it and hope like be in a safe position. And so it's very important that we reach out to this communities, this group of people that will come back to us and explain that it is very important that, you know, mommy and papa them when I need to take this vaccination, you know, speak to a language that they understand, and not this big book, big grammar, when I must take them and that. That's what instills the fear in people and the distrust in people. So I think that was for me one of the most important things to drive. We have those people talking to our mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters back in Cameroon and also in our communities here. Yes. On that note, Terence, you can. I have
one thing I forgot.
Okay, go ahead. His computer is freezing.
His computer is frozen.
Yeah, I think we lost him there. He should probably...
something happened. So do you think we are going to get this vaccine soon? Even if we want it, do you think it's going to be available for Africa?
No.
To me, this is really the big question. Do you think, despite all this advocacy, do you think we're going to have this vaccine? And this is where I fear the most, that the rest of the world will be vaccinated and Africa will be fighting to get the vaccine. At the end of the day, we'll be fighting to get the vaccine, especially the two that are actually licensed and not, the whole distribution, the way of getting it to Africa is going to be very difficult. And availability to us, there's a lot of nationalism occurring as a result of these vaccines.
Oh, I think we lost the main host. And that's a very important thing, I guess. Oh, he's back. I guess that's why Bill Gates' focus is straight up on Africa, because he knows that maybe at the tail end of it, Africa would be the one losing. So maybe I'll change my stance and not be as hard on him, you know, so that my continent is spared and, you know, my people are spared, you know. So you guys are beginning to convince me to soften my stance, you know, which is a good thing.
And this is why I'm saying this, because I did it's public health. The medications we give for HIV patients here in the US, we started giving them 5 years ago. Africa does not have it. We give Biktarvy, Africa does not have it. Our protocols are completely different from what you get in Cameroon. And that is why the Gates Foundation has been trying to finance. I just feel sorry for this group of people who are trying to help a group of people, because free help never works psychologically. I don't know, exactly. I'm not an anthropologist, nor a sociologist to understand this phenomenon, but what is happening here is that all the research that is done, people have the drugs available. Africa is going to be the last to have it. And exactly. We'll continue dying till then. The time before we had the vaccine for the last pandemic was when the pandemic had closed. What was it even called? The
H1N1?
H1N1. Do you know Africans were vaccinated for H1N1 about 3 years after the pandemic had ended?
Dr. Munoh, you're even talking about the pandemic. Even our traditional EPI vaccines.
Yeah.
Even our traditional EPI vaccines, in many of our African countries are able to get these vaccines through very complex funding mechanisms that are put in place by organizations like Gavi the Alliance, which is like a group of different healthcare related organizations that help to ensure that we get these vaccines at a subsidized rate, because we buy it over many years. Even traditional EPI vaccines that have been in our schedules for over years. If Gavi's support pulls out from many of our African countries, our governments would not be able to get these vaccines. That's the truth.
Cameroon will not be able to vaccinate any child without Gavi. And Gavi's funds, almost 20% comes from Gavi. Cameroon will not be able to vaccinate even a single child without Gavi. But I'm trying to think that we should rethink the model. Even the Gates Foundation to rethink their model of free giving to Africa at times. Maybe that's where the problem is.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I would just like to mention also like something to reiterate what Dr. Munoh has mentioned about how this vaccine, how this virus got into the US and most of Western Europe and developed countries in the first place. But I will go back to how it got to Cameroon, for example, in the first place. We all recall that around, I believe, in late February or March, it was a Cameroonian who traveled from Italy to Cameroon, or I believe either Italy or France to Cameroon, who took the virus to Cameroon and got people infected, and then other people got infected. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here to reiterate is that we don't have many people, maybe many people did not die because of the virus, but because people are still going to travel, they will still carry the virus from elsewhere and bring it to Cameroon. So that is very important. So I will move to the next question, which is actually, okay, maybe we answer this question from the member of the audience. We may have touched to part of the questions already. So I'll put it on the screen and then any of you can jump in and answer.
Okay.
I know you have answered some of the questions, so just briefly.
So I think the first part is what protection does the vaccine afford and for how long? That really, we don't know. It's important for us to say that we don't know how long it's going to be. And it actually, from the statistics we're seeing right now, it prevents 95% of people from getting sick. So it's going to, and it also, the Moderna vaccine actually prevents people from getting severe COVID disease. And the next part of the question, anyone wants to go with that?
I think I could. So the 6 says the vaccine is thought not to prevent anyone from being a carrier if it works. If true, is it fair to assume that it is not relevant from a public health perspective? So I just wish to correct that point. It's not that the vaccine is thought not to prevent someone from being a carrier. It's just that there's currently not sufficient evidence for the vaccines that have been licensed or have been authorized for emergency use to say for sure that people would not be carriers and shedding even after getting especially the first dose of the vaccine. And this is because the Pfizer vaccine that has been rolled out for emergency use looks like their data around that was not, sufficient. But the other vaccines whose studies are still ongoing are trying to address this question. And as we're collecting data, so let me just add, for a vaccine to be accepted for emergency use, they have to roll out, in addition to other things, they have to lay out a Pharmaco Vigilance plan. So the Pharmaco Vigilance plan requires them to be able to collect data for all of these other outcomes that are not known. Because the vaccine was developed over a short period of time, there's some aspects of long-term outcomes of the vaccine that are not known. And some of these data that you're questioning or questions that you have will be addressed in the pharmacovigilance plan, which involves recording how people are reacted to the vaccines, whether they have adverse events. And there are actually systems like the VERS systems, which collects some of these data, especially around adverse effects. So issues around, carrier states and, complete cure, they will be addressed as more data is coming out, because there's a difference between authorizing a vaccine for emergency use and having it licensed. Emergency use means that we think it's important to roll it out now because it's such a huge problem. And as we get more data, this vaccine, even though it's being rolled out, if tomorrow there's evidence that the vaccine is causing more harm than good, trust me, the FDA would not even think twice to stop it. They'll say, you put a stop. We don't care how much has been invested. We have to stop. But emergency use is, before they rolled it out for emergency use, they've looked at it. They say, for now, we know it works and it's safe. And it might have a few side effects, but overall, the benefits far, far outweigh the risk. So, but we are still collecting more data based on what's happening and further feeding into the evidence that we have. And at the end of the day, it could be licensed for use, but it's currently just emergency use.
Great. Thank you, Alison, for that response. And I think it is very important to reiterate one of the things you mentioned here is about what they call pharmacovigilance. So every ministry of health, at least that I know in the developed world, have this department where they collect data for every drug, every vaccine that has been approved. where they collect post-implementation data. If anything happens, if you give this vaccine to an individual and the hand gets swollen, it is reported. So they collect all this data every other day. There are people whose main job is just to collect that kind of data. And then over time, they will review it. And that is why from time to time, you will see a name of the drug. You will hear that this drug has been modified to this because maybe some of the ingredients were what was causing this reaction. Now they have been removed. From time to time, you will hear that a few months ago, was it sometime last year, I think Dr. Munoh, you and I shared that article where one, I think, was it a Zantac was withdrawn?
Yes. Ranitidine.
Yes, ranitidine was withdrawn from the market because there was one of the components which they believe can have long-term effect. So from time to time, there are people who keep on reviewing this from their taxpayers' money. So don't think that their taxpayers' money is wasted and that someone is just there waiting for you to die. If you die, remember, you won't be paying any more taxes and the government won't make money. Remember,
pass it on to your family. There's a question that's generating its own conversation within the comment section, right? That I just want you guys to kind of touch on because they're going back and forth. And since we have you guys here, I just want you guys to highlight that so that anybody who's in the comment section can have some clarification on that. Recently in Australia, they had the vaccine that reproduced an HIV result, and they had to put the Australian, and that's the question. Australia already stopped the vaccine due to HIV viruses in it. So please be careful because now everybody is investigating information now, and we are waiting their family members. And this is the comment that is generating the whole debate. Everybody's trying to clarify what happened in Australia. So can you guys develop on what exactly happened in Australia so we can put Mr. Tabby as worries or hesitancy to rest?
Yeah, I think we already discussed this with Dr. Munoh yesterday. I will let him start answering the question, and if there is anything to add, I will be pleased to add.
Yeah, so what I want to say is that to me, it's always a good thing that you have the observatory body, which is looking into every trial, is able to pick out things that do happen, and we're able to know that these things are happening. It's actually a triumph to science. It's not a failure. So in these situations, the people were not becoming HIV positive truly. The way the HIV test is done, it's actually, Terence knows that very well, it's the 3rd generation and 4th generation antibody testing, it's an ELISA test. We're picking out antibodies. At times in the body, we're picking out antigens, but here we're picking out antibodies. So the body is able to pick out certain antibodies. So once this vaccine was given, some people made antibodies that resemble the antibodies that you pick for HIV. So that's really how the test became positive. It doesn't mean the people got HIV. So it's completely different from the people being infected with HIV and having a positive test based on the tests that we're carrying out for HIV, which are not very specific in itself. So some of these tests, depending on what test was used, they picked it up very early, and they were able to halt the trial and actually stop the trial as a result of that. But this did not actually infect people to become HIV positive. We use retroviruses, which is not necessarily HIV, in order to carry genetic material into our cells.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are the ones we use. We call them viral vectors. So majority of vectors that we can use, a vector is a car that we use to chauffeur around. The passenger is the spike protein messenger RNA we're carrying in it. So some of those viruses that we use are retroviruses that we can use as a car. So in this particular, I'm still to read the article. So as a result of that, the body was able to identify that as an antibody that has a link. It's not the same antibody. The test, we're testing antibodies that came out positive in some HIV tests for people who did the test. It has nothing to do with infecting people with HIV. It has nothing to do with integrating into the human genome, no. As we said in the beginning, this is a messenger, the body deletes it, the body makes antibodies. We do have people who have been HIV negative who have tested positive. because of the flaws of our test, because our test antibodies. Yeah. Except you're doing a PCR test, which is going to test the genetic material of HIV itself. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, the rapid tests are actually antibodies, and they are false positives. We know that.
That's correct.
That is why once you get a positive HIV test, you need to have a confirmatory test. We used to use two things, the ELISA and the Western blot. We no longer do that, but you have to have, the first test is a screening test, which is more sensitive, but less specific. The second test is a test which is very specific. So we're doing two barriers. That's how we do for HIV. But in this case, the sensitivity test tested positive in some people. So just as a result of the body reacting to that virus or to that protein.
Yeah, Dr. Munoh, let me just continue to answer, because I think there is someone else who is asking that same question. I'll mention here that the way I have read a little bit about this article, and what they did was, like Dr. Munoh explained, they used a protein, an HIV protein, to carry the spike protein into the body. So when the body saw this protein, it generated antibodies against that HIV protein. And because the HIV test they were using in testing is based on identifying HIV antibodies produced by the body was the tests were found to be positive. What we call this in lab medicine is a false positive test, or basically we generally call them an interference. It means something is interfering with that test to give you a result which is not caused by that particular disease-causing agent. Are antibodies produced against an HIV protein? That's correct. Are these people HIV infected? That is not correct. That is not true. So basically, that is what you need to know. And so the other thing which is going to happen is when people when the AstraZeneca vaccines get rolled out, this one is carried by a chimpanzee adenovirus. Those people are going to produce antibodies against this chimpanzee adenovirus. And if you test them against chimpanzee adenovirus, they are going to come positive. So that is what is going to happen. That is how medicine is basically taking messages from outside, usually from different organisms, to humans. And the reason they do that in most cases is that for the AstraZeneca vaccine, for example, is because in most cases they use viruses that infect humans but don't cause any disease. But what they notice with vaccines in particular is that but when they use those kind of vaccines, the body generates an immune system already against those carriers. So that vaccine is not effective. So then they go to use vaccines by carriers which infect different species, not humans. That way, your body hasn't seen that before. Your body haven't produced antibodies against that before. And therefore, your body is capable, will therefore recognize that the carrier, which is the vaccine in this case, the vaccine, the protein from the vaccine, and produce antibodies or generate an immune response against it. So basically, that is just the summary. I don't know if I made myself clear, because it's a little bit complex to explain, but just the take-home message here is that these people are not infected with HIV. And I know the next question is going to be, why was it withdrawn? It was withdrawn because of people like you and I. There is this drama. We always react to bad news. And so what is going to be said is that, like you mentioned here, is that the Australian virus is giving people HIV, and therefore no one will take it. In order for the government to ensure people get protected in future against HIV, the right approach is to withdraw this vaccine as honest as possible to the public, assure the people that it is not HIV, but we are going to withdraw it because you have doubts, because there are always people who are going to have doubts in that. And I think that's something Alison has seen a lot with in our vaccine hesitancy study, that is that confidence which is now missing. So in order to give the people confidence, you say, okay, yeah, we have had your trouble. We will explain to you what happened. It is not giving people HIV, but we are going to withdraw it. And the reason is because maybe in Australia, they might do a different test for HIV. But if that person moves from Australia and goes to a different country where it's only an antibody assay, those people are going to be ruled as HIV positive. And there is no way they could deny that because the antibodies are there. But those people, I can guarantee you, they are not infected with the HIV virus. So I don't know if anyone has anything to add, but Trace, maybe you move to the next question.
Okay. So again, the majority of these questions we've kind of like touched them with our conversation, and that's a good thing. So we'll just go through some of the questions that come up in the comment section. Shirley H.U. Tabot H.U. says, Dr. Terence Agbo, is it possible to have a vaccine made and put in use without knowing the length of time it confers immunity? So I'll have any one of you all react to that question.
So I will want to say, I said I didn't know because, as Alison rightly explained, there is a surveillance, and this is not this is an emergency use authorization. We're still learning a lot out of this vaccine. But there was a paper that came out in New England Journal saying the vaccine confers immunity for 6 months. We've known this virus for only a year. We should know that. You can't say it confers immunity for 10 years when you have not known the virus for 10 years. We started this 6 months ago. This adventure was started 6 months ago. And there is actually data in the phase 2 clinical trial for the Moderna vaccine showing that it confers immunity for 6 months. And as much as we start accumulating the data, we'll be able to tell people exactly how many months the immunity is conferred for. So it's because of the length of time we've been using the vaccine and we've known this virus. We don't want to pass across the wrong information to the public. We've given a vaccine to a group of people. We're studying them to see how long they can stay without getting infection. And as Alison rightly said, we had an emergency use authorization. We are still monitoring this virus. And at the end of the process, the monitoring process, will be able to answer most of these research questions. But what we know right now is that it prevents 95% of people from getting infected. The Moderna aspect of the virus prevented 100% of people from getting severe disease. 100. Out of the 11 people who got severe disease, none of them was someone who took the vaccine. Out of the number of people who got infected, only few of them, actually 5% of them, were actually those who got the vaccine and they had mild disease. This is an exceptional, successful vaccination strategy. Few vaccines do what this vaccine does. Very few.
Yeah, so I have another question here which was sent earlier in the day. One of the first people to ask a question. It is a subject usually I don't like to discuss, to mention the name of the individual, but this question was asked, so I have to ask it. So I'll read it, and I don't understand the question fully, but I think you guys, I know where he's driving to. So I'll read it word verbatim. So this came from Jude Tomdio. So he asked, I know there are a lot of disinformation out here about the vaccine. There are two of such that caught his attention, we showed on his WhatsApp feed. The first was a video from the infamous or famous Dr. Emmanuel stating that vaccines were developed with mRNA. And then he said he has not researched that, and her video caused her lost me when he linked it. Okay, so I think the video, the mRNA, linked it to religion and heaven. But there are other videos from other doctors mentioning a similar thing, that the vaccine fundamentally changing, that the messenger RNA vaccine is fundamentally changing our DNA, which is similar to the concerns of the video of Dr. Emmanuel. So his question here is, what are our thoughts? Or so is there any truth in this argument?
Okay, maybe I'll just start and then give the floor to the other panelists. So the first thing I want to send out there is that decisions in science are not made on emotions or feelings. They are made on facts. Okay, so there's this famous quote by some famous researcher who said, "In God we trust, everyone else must show the data." So we can be Christians, we can be atheists. People have different, beliefs. But when it comes to science, it's not about individuals. It's not about emotions. It's not about beliefs. Scientific recommendations are made based on the evidence that is available. If I stand today and say I'm going to take a COVID vaccine, I'm taking that COVID vaccine based on two things. I might be a clinician with epi background, but I can assure you that there's a lot of immunology that goes on that I don't even understand fully, half of it. We come and we sit on this platform and we talk about these things. We just say antibodies. When you sit in an immunology class, it's a lot more complex than we have it on this platform. So when I say I'm going to take a COVID vaccine, it's based on the assumption, on the understanding that the expert panel that recommended this vaccine has thought through all of these things. It's a panel constituting of people who are highly experienced, who are often experts in their fields, and they've had these discussions. They've looked at everything and they looked at the pros and the cons, and they said, despite everything we know, we recommend that you take this vaccine. And it's also based on the fact that we are trusting the data that is being provided to us. Now, regarding Stella Emanuel, first of all, as a clinician and her beliefs, it's important. I mean, we shouldn't feel shy to talk about these things. These are the realities we face. I would respect anybody's views, whether a colleague or anyone in the street, if you tell me this is based on evidence. But when it becomes around your perceptions and your beliefs and you're trying to guide people in that direction, when you do not have the scientific facts to back up your argument, that is where I have a concern. If you go to the garage, for example, and your mechanic tells you there's this part in your car that needs to be changed, on average, the men, if your scientist or the garage person who is giving you that advice, your mechanic, this guy, he's so skilled at what he does and he's so experienced. If he tells you change this part, he's going to solve the problem. You will trust him. You will trust him. That's probably what's going to happen. You will trust him. So because he's talking based on facts, based on what's available, we should not talk science based on emotions. Regarding the effects of the mRNA vaccine on genetic modification, interestingly, I actually watched about 2 of these videos, and people are worried that, using genetic material from the virus, whether it's mRNA or what other genetic material that's out there, could have a potential effect on modifying our genes. Are these concerns valid? Are these questions valid questions? Yes, they are valid questions. But I will always recommend to channel the questions to the right people than making out videos and making out bogus assumptions that are not based on science. Dr. Foma, I'll hand the floor to you.
I want to say, I'll go back to my cake analogy. My cake analogy, the cake is the protein. The book you pull out of the library or you photocopy is your messenger RNA you use to make your protein, to make your cake, and the book on the shelf is actually your DNA. Can that photocopy any day ever become a book? The answer is actually no. It's possible in few circumstances, but the answer is actually generally no. Why? Because messenger RNA, as it's called, for those who have done the science of it, is destroyed. There is no way it can actually become integrated into the DNA. That's why it's being used. In certain specific ways, if we're going to detail science, as Alison said, we detail other things to make it change into a DNA and integrate it into our cells, into our genetic material. But the way this vaccine is made, it cannot integrate into the cell. I'm trying to answer Stella's question specifically. So it's totally not true information generally, not true at all. So that's the first part of it. The second part of the question was more of, it's something you can never argue. You don't argue feelings and science and facts, because each time someone is quoting religion, I'm also very religious, but each time someone is quoting religion, they are all now talking about dogma. So you cannot actually argue with them. So you need to be able to tell them to provide what facts they have. And I think I would actually leave it there, but the answer I would say here in this forum is categorical no. If you want to get the details and for us to go into details, we can go into details in another forum.
Yeah. Just to add a little bit of that, she mixes a little bit of science with a little bit of beliefs and a little bit of religion, and they play around with words. Like she keeps on talking about Luciferase. And if you talk about Luciferase in a Christian community, it's like a word derived from Lucifer, which is not. Luciferase is just an oxidative enzyme that has bioluciferase, that bioluminescence that produces light. But she talks about that in the context of it being as an offshoot from the word Lucifer. So if they are using Lucifer for whatever in your body, they're introducing Antichrist into you. And I told one guy that if she believes and she has proof that what she thinks is absolutely scientific, then she can publish it in the peer-reviewed journal so that all of us can read it. I mean, anybody can make a viral video and attach the name Dr. Fru, and you say, oh, a Dr. Fru is saying this. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Dr. Jerumgwa. Let's use Dr. Jerumgwa.
She's a medical doctor. She has anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is everywhere. If you want to make a case on one patient, you will have one patient that you administer a vaccine and the patient will start hopping like a cat. That does not mean all patients, everybody who receives that vaccine will jump like a cat. As a veterinarian, we've been doing massive vaccination campaigns for cattle, for horses, for dogs, for pigs, for sheep. Some of them have untoward reactions. Like we say, a vaccine is not harmless. It is safe because the good it does outweighs the bad that would have happened if you never administered the vaccine. On the area of the length of the protective antibodies created by this COVID vaccine, like Dr. Foma rightly said, we don't know. But it has been known over time that some of the microorganisms that have safely been contained by vaccinations are those which causes lifelong protection. For example, some people who had the SARS of 2013 and had severe diseases, some of them have been found out to still have protective antibodies in their system up to today from a natural infection. So we don't know how long a vaccine-produced antibody will be protective in the human. Just wanted to add that.
And it's important, you brought the word luciferics.
Yeah.
Many people I'm one of those who I study religion for the sake of overstudying it. The word Lucifer means morning star.
Yeah.
It means light. So anything in Latin, when we talk about light, stars, we can always use the word Lucifer. People get into these emotions at times, they don't know what words they're using.
Yeah.
In science, we use the word Lucy, which is used a lot in science because it comes derived from Latin. So Lucifer actually means morning star, light. That's actually what the translation in Latin really means, those who studied it, those who want to study it. But it's really one of those things that we need to be able not to, we get fooled a lot because the messages those who pass across, who are anti-science, they use emotions, we try to use statistics.
Yeah.
And those are not two things that we can actually debate in the field about because they are not actually based on facts. They are based on emotions and they run across human emotions.
Yeah.
I think we are running to the end of the show. You guys have done a very fantastic job, but I think Tres has a very important question to ask, and I think it's a general question because we've been hearing about it. This word is one of the most used words with respect to COVID-19.
Right. So within the during the presidential election campaign, there was a word that came up called herd immunity. Republicans were pushing it up and saying, we go with herd immunity, and so that we don't have to take a vaccine. At the time, the vaccine had not been released, but recently, now that the vaccine has been released, Dr. Fauci said for us to get to a level of herd immunity, we need to have the population vaccinated at a rate of about 60 to 85%. I know that Terrence does not like us putting people in percentages, but for this last question, I promise I'm just going to put them in. So we need to have the population to be vaccinated at that rate for herd immunity to be attained or achieved. For me, I don't know what that means. I don't know how somebody who is vaccinated can make me immune to the virus. So can you guys break it down how the vaccinated population can help transfer immunity to the population that has not been vaccinated? And will the vaccine be mandated for people to take? That's the last part of the question, but just focus on the first part.
Okay. Maybe I'll dive in. So the concept of herd immunity, I want you to look at it this way. Every person, the average person can fall in one of three categories. So either you're susceptible. So susceptible means that you have not had the infection and you can't have the infection. Or you're infected. Infected means that you currently have the infection. Or you're or you're recovered. So recovered means, let's just say you're immune. Let's assume in this case that if you get the infection, you get immune. Let's say, oh, you're immune. Immune means that you've either had the infection and you recovered, or you have been vaccinated. You've received the vaccine. So if an infected person meets someone who is infected, the person is already infected anyway, so you cannot further spread the infection. We're all just infected. We're all sitting, let's say we're 5 of us on this platform. If one person is infected and let's say, Tres, you meet Munoh, you're both infected, you cannot spread the infection. So you're all infected. But if you, Tres, you're infected hypothetically, and you meet Munoh, who is a susceptible person, it means that you can spread the infection to him. And if Dr. Tata is susceptible, Dr. Foma can spread the infection to Dr. Tata. So it keeps spreading. So long as you keep meeting people who are susceptible, it means that they have not had the infection and they're just, there and they're exposed and everything, the infection is going to spread. Now, for you to be able to get herd immunity, what happens? If, say, you, Tres, who is infected, you meet, let's say, Munoh, who is immune. Immune means that he has been vaccinated and his body has developed an immune response to that vaccine. You cannot spread the infection anymore. So if you, Tres, is one person infected and everyone else around us is, let's say, immune because we've been vaccinated, the infection stops spreading. So let's say now Agbo is not vaccinated, he's susceptible, and you, Tres, are infected. But the three of us are immune, so we don't have the infection and we cannot get it. Even if you come across, say, Munoh and I and then Tata, the infection is not going to spread. And it helps to protect Agbo, who we come in contact, because we, the three of us, as a result of being immune because we have been vaccinated, we are blocking that infection from further spreading. So the whole concept of herd immunity is that when you have an increasing proportion of the population that is immune to the disease, whether it's as a result of vaccination or it's as a result of natural infection, it protects even the people who are not vaccinated, people who are susceptible, because the infection stops spreading at the rate at which it would have spread if you did not have immune people. Yes. Now, the problem with having herd immunity from a natural infection is that it's been shown, based on studies that have been published so far, that when you get the infection, the immunity that is conferred by natural infection is not a long-lasting immunity. So it lasts for a short period of time, and then the person who got the infection becomes susceptible again. So if you get a natural infection today, and then maybe your body develops antibodies, maybe after 3, 4, 5, 6 months, there's a high chance that you can get COVID a second time. And it makes you susceptible. If your immune response you got from a natural infection wanes, you become susceptible again. And it means that we keep having a large pool of people who are susceptible, and the infection keeps spreading. So the secret is to get as many people in the system as immune as possible through vaccination, so that even those who are not immune yet and who are still susceptible are protected, because the immune people block the infection from spreading in the communities.
And let me take a second part of that question and how foolish the idea of anyone getting infection could be. I just want to make everyone understand how stupid this idea could really come across. So, herd immunity, do we have a vaccine for the chicken pox? I don't know if you've ever heard about a vaccine for chicken pox. The answer is likely there is that for shingles, which is almost the same thing that causes it, but there is nothing for chicken pox because it's an indolent disease. Majority of those who have it don't have anything. That's why parents organize chicken pox parties. Have you ever heard about that? Where everyone comes in, everyone gets chicken pox, so that everyone knows that once you get chicken pox, you don't have it again, unless your immune system has a problem. Everyone also knows that once you have measles, you don't have it again. Why don't we organize measles parties for everyone to get measles? Do you know why we don't? The world used to have, without doing anything for measles, you would have
He's a bad guy.
We could still describe Terence as someone who has a PhD in this, but you are not going to be able. That is how HIV succeeds in tricking our immune system. HIV is a dangerous virus because it comes and tells the immune system has never known how to identify HIV. The immune system keeps the American Navy that goes for battle every time and identifies the enemy wrongly. Each time HIV virus appears, the immune system identifies it wrongly. So many wrong times that the immune system becomes confused, and it actually targets our generals and kills them, which is the T cells in the body. I'm just going into that, a bit of immunology in the layman terms. It comes in, kills the generals first, and allows all the captains and every other person confused. This is why we need a target that can be recognized by the immune system, build a strong immunity, be able to target it directly and say, this is SARS-CoV-2. This is it, we're going to destroy it. Once you're able to do that, you're going to be able to not kill people, but get immunity that is going to last. As Alison, I don't want to go into herd immunity again. She explains it in a wonderful way. Then create herd immunity. And those who are vaccine hesitant because their children have allergies, they are the ones who are supposed to champion vaccines, because those children cannot get vaccines. Truly, there are people who cannot get vaccines because they're allergic to everything. And we need to, I have all my cancer patients cannot get live attenuated vaccines. All my cancer patients who are on treatment cannot get certain vaccines. They may not be able to even get the RNA vaccine unless it's clear. So they cannot get certain vaccines. We need to vaccinate ourselves so that we'll protect these cancer children. We're going to protect these children who are born with immune deficiencies. We're going to protect HIV patients. We're going to protect patients who are sick. We're going to protect those who have allergies in the future. And that is how herd immunity works. And actually, herd immunity is a complex thing. Rolling numbers actually really depend on the infectious rate also. So for measles, the rate of herd immunity, you have to go up to 80%, 80 to 95% to get, because measles is very infectious. The less infectious it is, the more you can take the percentage up and down. So really the whole concept is, Alison explained it so wonderfully.
Yeah, that was a very good presentation. And then one problem we'll face with this herd immunity stuff is that people who listen to their spiritual leaders always belong to a cluster group of people. And those clusters will not take this vaccine, and all those around it might take it. But when the infection hits that community, it will be devastating. So like Alison rightly said, it's a matter of numbers. If Fauci says 60 to 70% of the people have to be vaccinated to get herd immunity, and my Republican folks are saying, why don't we allow this 60 to 70% to be naturally infected? You're talking about 200 million people. And with the death rate, as Dr. Foma said, you're talking about a huge number of the population being offered as sacrificial lamb for us to have natural herd immunity. Herd immunity is a concept that is being commonly practiced in veterinary medicine. When we have highly infectious disease, the first thing we do is we quarantine. People were saying, oh, you can never quarantine people. Wuhan did it. And the quarantine, I think, was 60 million people, and they succeeded. One thing we do, which I will not advocate in the human medical field, is burn and bury. You get a cluster of sick people who are potentially being able to infect the whole community. You put them into an incinerator and you burn them up. That's what we do in animals, though. I don't recommend that for humans.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Terence, just one. Let me slot one something that just popped in my mind, and I think it's important. So I know that I don't remember if it's Dr. Alison or if it's Dr. Foma that said the Pfizer vaccine is 2 in the space of 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So which one are we? Which one would be recommended if people are looking like, do I need to take 2 shots as opposed to do I need to take 1 shot? So how should somebody make a decision? Because it's going to come down when the frontliners have gotten all the shots. When it comes down to the lay people, where we're going to have AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, and we have to make a decision. When I'm calling my doctor, how do I decide which one do I want to take?
So for now, the ones that are available, I want to start with what is available now, please. For now, what is available, both of them are 2 shots.
Oh, okay.
Pfizer and Moderna are both 2 shots.
2 shots.
Alison said that very well. They are both 2 shots because they're RNA viruses. We need to boost them. Now, AstraZeneca, we think they were working on 1 shot. Even the Sputnik, they are working on 1 shot. The thing about what you take, it's going to come out to efficiency, efficacy, side effects, and convenience. It's not only going to be about all of this. Convenience is one part of it, which is a 1 shot. You take it once and you're done. Now, efficacy. The efficacy that is being reported with the AstraZeneca is 70% efficacious, and it varies from 60 to 90 depending on the subgroup and the dose that was used. The Sputnik, the Russian one, is it the Sputnik? Yeah,
something Sputnik, yeah.
So the Russian one, which we have not seen the data, they said they had a 90% efficacy.
Yeah,
it's wonderful. If that is it, the Sino China vaccine also is reporting the other day an 80-something% efficacy, and they're all using the vector viral technology, which is most likely going to be a single dose. And it's also going to be easy in Africa because you need regular fridges to store it. You don't need, for Moderna, you need -20 Fahrenheit. For Pfizer, you need -70. Even the US doesn't have, all the US hospitals, some of them don't have that technology. So it's going to be stored in such a way that you get dry eyes. I think next week I'll be taking mine. I like to tell everyone I'll be taking it next week. I've been called already. So next week I'm in line for the Pfizer vaccine, and I'm going to take it. I believe in it, and I believe in vaccines. And I feel that vaccines are safe. They are the most important public health intervention humans have created after hygiene and sanitation. It's a fact. I'm not any way related to infectious disease. I'm an oncologist in training, but that is a fact without hesitating. So I'm going to take it because I believe in the technology, I believe in the science I've seen, and I'm going to convince everyone to take it.
Fantastic. So we have come to the end of the show. We spent a little bit more time than we anticipated, but that is because we had a lot of information to give out there. I think based on the number of questions I have seen on the comment section, we could go on for the next 2 days. We won't be able to exhaust everything. So without much ado, I will go through the roundtable to ask you guys for the last word. In our culture, I read Alison's introduction first, so I will still go with ladies before gentlemen. So we had a privilege to have you among all these guys. So what is your last word for the audience?
Thank you very much, Terence. And I think my last take-home message is this. My brothers, my sisters, my fathers, anyone watching the program, when these vaccines become available in our settings, if our health authorities and our experts recommend that we should take them, please get yourself vaccinated. Your concerns around safety, efficacy, and long-term effects are valid. Please go to your healthcare providers and talk about these concerns with them to get clarified. And always ensure that you're getting the message from the right sources, not conspiracy theories. But bottom line, please, please, please do not hesitate. If these vaccines are recommended, go out there and get yourselves vaccinated. Thank you.
That was good.
Thank you very much, Alison. You did a fantastic job despite your very, very tight schedule. I don't think you've eaten, so in the next few minutes, I will let you go and get some food because I know you traveled, arrived this morning, and just look for your computer. So thank you once more. It was very, very exciting, very educative, and I hope our audience may have learned a thing or two about the discussion. So, Dr. Ateh, your last word.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Agbo. Thank you, Alison and Foma and Tres. It's been a pleasure to be with you guys on the panel. And I'll re-echo what Alison just said. Please go out and be vaccinated. Vaccines don't protect. Vaccinations protect. The vaccines can be out there on the shelves. It will not protect you. Please go out and get vaccinated. If you belong to a local community group, your Jangi group, your alumni group, and you gain something from this, our panel discussions, please don't hesitate to share it with them back home here in the US and encourage others to please go out and be vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ateh. I hope the message went out. The message is very clear. As good as a vaccine, if you are hungry and you have food in your house, you don't eat the food, you are still going to be hungry. Yeah. So that is a message. Dr. Munoh, you take your last word.
Well, it's a message I pass across every time. It's a humbling message from a public health physician saying to people that over the past 100 years, the past 1,000 years as humans we've been, or millions of years we've evolved on Earth, or whenever God created us, there are 4 interventions that we know that save lives. Even being humble enough as someone who is treating cancer that other things don't work, hygiene and sanitation is a basic thing in life. We should not forget about it. It stops infectious diseases. Vaccination has actually increased the life expectancy and has made Cuba to be as equal as US in terms of life expectancy, despite the amount of technology the US has. Doing basic things work. The use of antibiotics was a great discovery. And please, lifestyle changes, stopping smoking, alcohol consumption is just a public health thing for me. The rest other interventions don't mean anything. We do them, they make us happy as physicians. We stop one person from dying from a cardiac arrest, but remember these things. Vaccine is a big one and is the one that has the highest level of hesitancy. Go vaccinate yourself, as Dr. Tata and Dr. Alison said. Go vaccinate yourself. And if you have questions, you have the right to be hesitant, but you also have the right to find information from the right source, please. And I don't want you to go ahead and believe everything in science. Question it. It's your right. But listen to the right sources and also have an open mind. Don't go in with too much feelings and with religion cannot be willing to change.
Great. Trace, I think you will be ending the show today. Thank you, lady and gentlemen. It was a pleasure having you here, and also shout out to all the people who watch all your questions. I will recommend and plead for Dr. Alison, Dr. Tata, and Dr. Foma to find some time, go through this comment section, because there is an extensive list of questions. If they could address some of them, that would be very much appreciated. When I have time, I will also go through them. So, Trace, it's over to you.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thank you, Terrence, for doing an amazing job hosting. Thanks to the Big Debate platform for this opportunity that we've been able to put out this message. Like I said earlier, myself and Dr. Tata, we've gone back and forth on this vaccination stuff. That's why he went hard on me when he started. And thanks to people like Dr. Alison, who was able to put it in very simple terms. The herd immunity explanation was, I don't know, it was just amazing. And now I'm convinced on COVID. We're going to fight another fight on a different vaccine. My questions have been answered. I will take the COVID shot. My family is going to take it. And I'm going to make out a video to also encourage people to go out there and take the COVID shot. And also, I'm going to hope that Africa is ready to welcome the COVID vaccine. And whenever there's another disease and pandemic, trust me, I'm going to start another new fight, because we have to ask these questions and we need these questions to be answered. So It's been an amazing ride. It's been 2.5 hours. I hope that everybody has taken something home with them today. Catch you guys next time, and good night and good luck.
Yes. And just before we leave, please, all you, our guests, please, if you could just wait at the lobby so that we chat a little bit. And to everyone, please join us next week, same time. We'll be having as guest on this program, Barrister Agbo Nkongo. We'll be discussing about the crisis in Cameroon. So have a good evening and see you next week. Goodbye.